Back. On Monday, the judge presiding over the corruption trial of ANC KZN Deputy Chairperson Michael Maboyakulu and 15 others made it clear that there will be no entering the People's Court without producing a vaccination card or proof of a negative COVID-19 test result taken in the last 7 days. So, what does it mean for our human rights? Let's now bring in legal expert. This is litigation associate from Fundaventures Incorporation, who is Rhoten Balak, joining us to discuss this. Rhoten, thank you so much for making time. Government is still thinking about mandatory vaccines and vaccine passports, and yet this is already being implemented. Is there legal ground?
Well, firstly, good afternoon, Clement, and a very good afternoon to all the viewers as well. Looking at this no vaccine, no entry policy as implemented by Judge Shetty during his most recent trial, we have to consider various factors. The first is that this decision isn't purely based off of the fact that all should be obligated to be vaccinated, but more on the fact that all that want to participate or should participate, should produce a negative COVID-19 test. And that being done within the past days. So now I'm sure yourself and a majority of all the viewers are aware of the whole application of the Section 36 limitation clause in our Constitution. And I think this is where the balancing of rights come into play. The first right, or first couple of rights we have to consider, is that of bodily integrity, the right to freedom of religion, belief and opinion. And I think one most important one, especially in this instance, is the right to access to courts. And then on the other hand, what we have is also a right not, usually mentioned, and is that everyone is entitled to an environment that is not harmful to the health or well-being. Now, notwithstanding the entitlement to these rights, most rights in our Constitution can be limited, obviously provided that the limitation is of general application and is reasonable and justifiable, that it is rational, proportional, and least restrictive in terms of achieving the objective. Now, the challenges that we're considering here at the moment is, whether or not this type of policy implemented is reasonable and justifiable. Whether or not you can compel members of the public to actually produce tests or negative COVID-19 tests in order to participate. Now, we know that this whole implementation of the no vaccine, no entry policy has been implemented in other countries, such as the UK. However, I think when we need to implement it, or when we're thinking about implementing such a policy, we have to take a lot of factors into consideration, especially our economical circumstances in South Africa. There's a lot of individuals off the street who won't be able to afford, just getting a test done every week in order to participate in a public event, such as, for example, this trial. So I think that's probably the things that we have to consider when looking at implementing such a policy.
Yeah, and shouldn't we also consider perhaps a broader decision? Because I'm thinking, can a judge make that decision themselves? Because they're under the authority as well. Is this a decision that the judge president in KwaZulu-Natal should perhaps take and communicate it to the rest of the judges, perhaps after consultation with the Chief Justice, so that there's consistency in how this is applied and implemented? Or can any judge, like in this case, make the decision?
I think that, when decisions like these are implemented, I think it's very important to look back at, it actually being published in terms of the regulations. We know that this has happened before. I think earlier in March this year, we know that regulations have been published, for example, in terms of, international travel, where if you wanted to travel internationally or, come to South Africa or exit South Africa, you had to obtain a certain, negative test, and that done, within 2 hours of traveling, and a test that has actually been approved by the World Health Organization. So I think in order for us to implement these type of policies, we are going to have to consider it becoming regulation and published, before just outrightly stating that this is now a policy that forms part of a specific court.
Yeah. I heard some people also raising some financial constraints, that some people may not even afford another test for when the court sits again. I think this was an explanation or a concern that was raised by one of the defense lawyers. Does that stand?
Definitely. You know, I think obviously if it can be implemented in such a way where, for example, government had to cover these type of tests for those who cannot afford it, that will be a different story. But at the moment, and as it stands, I think presently what we have and what we're experiencing is where majority of the public won't be able to afford, you know, not only one test being done, but if they have to participate, you know, over a period of time, multiple tests to be done. So I do believe there's multiple financial implications involved in this type of policy. And then together with that, I don't necessarily think it will be financially nor periodically plausible to implement this type of policy, because you're not only looking at the fact of the financial, you know, concerns, but also the fact that, you know, you must be able to go for a test and almost immediately obtain a negative report, you know, if you want to, for example, go to court the following day. So there's a lot of issues, you know, to be considered, not only that of the financial constraints.
Yeah, so many rights to balance, right? I just hope that very soon, before it's too late, the matter can get to the courts or the constitutional court, so we get more legal clarity, right? Is it, what is the imperative? Is it more our individual rights to bodily integrity, or is it more about, you know, the public health imperative? So the sooner that clarity, the better, and companies and even courts and arms of the state can take decisions that they know there's legal ground and they stand legal scrutiny. Thank you for making time, Rolton. You've been brilliant in helping us understand the importance of balancing these rights. Rolton Balak is a litigation associate from Van Deventers Incorporated.